Most of you with us have met Simon Majumdar before, and he's been with us. We decided today, it's been probably 6 times he's been around some of our events in the past, between GCIA, ICCA, some immersions, or even some tours we did with even some of our other member companies. In particular with Witch and Jeff in New York, a sandwich tour was really cool. But you guys all know him as, basically a food writer, speaker, author, but mostly from the Food Network and a lot of the shows he's done there as a judge. And that's what's been really fun for me. And I'll say, as I introduce Justin Warner, that, getting to know Justin here in a few calls prior to this. And of course, everybody at ICCA will get to see them at our ICCA Summit in Providence in June. Is what was really interesting is you can see how these guys mesh. I mean, it's really interesting to hear you both are really extremely intelligent people, very much into history. Justin brought it up earlier about just being a geek and wanting to learn about everything. And Simon is certainly that as well, right? And that's using it in a very good way. But it's really interesting. And I think that's what really worked in Tournament of Champions, is your extreme knowledge of food and the way that you can explain the very complicated dishes in a manner that everybody can understand, I think really helped make that show successful. So if anybody has not seen the show, you've got to see the show. It's the best show. I told Simon, we'll watch shows, and sometimes we don't finish all the shows and we'll see it whenever we want. This was a binge watch. We couldn't stop. I was like, we didn't watch them on Sunday night because we'd rather go the next day. We don't have to watch the commercials. But it was a binge watch, and we couldn't wait to find out who won before we found out from somebody else who really won. But the talent that was on the show, and we'll talk a little bit about that today and more about that when we're in Providence. But enough on the introductions. Let me just bring Simon on. And Simon, you're going to talk to Justin a little bit about his past and where he's come from and where he's going and where he is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, everybody. So it's good to be back again. Yeah, we were figuring out just how many ICCA and GCIA events I've done. It's a lot, and we've been all over the country. So it's great to see you all again. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in June, and we can actually share some time, have a drink, and just swap stories. But what I really wanted to do, and I was chatting with Kevin about ways that we could do more things, was to bring along some of the people from Food Network or my career that I think are just the most interesting, just the people who I think have the most interesting look at the culinary world, just think about it in a different way, just have different processes that you would find really interesting. And from Justin's point of view, as I said to him, I think the people I meet at ICCA and GCIA are the most kind of inquisitive of any chefs I ever meet. And I love the fact that you're always asking questions. So I hope you're going to be able to ask lots of questions now and share some stuff with us. A quick introduction for how I met Justin before I go on and introduce him kind of properly was I was writing my book, which was called Fed White and Blue, which was in 2013. And a mutual friend, now you have it there, excellent, available at all good remainder stores. Now, if you were to, a mutual friend introduced us and basically said, you should come and talk to Justin. He's really interesting. At that point, we'll talk about it. Justin had just won a very major Food Network competition. And they said, you should go and meet him. So I turned up in Brooklyn, where Justin had a restaurant, and we'll mention that. And the moment he came to pick me up in his very battered Jeep Wrangler or whatever it was that I think was made in about 1914, it had no sides. It had, if I remember right, and Justin will remind me, it had an 8-track or some very bizarre radio function in there that played music, but it wasn't actually a radio. And if I remember rightly, as he drove us around Brooklyn, eating lots of great food, he used to just leave the car outside the restaurant and leave the key in it with the idea, I think, that if anyone was going to break in, they were probably just going to tidy it up a bit. And so I realized I was with someone who just had a completely different thought process to 90% of the people I'd ever met in my life. But when he then started taking me around extraordinary restaurants in that Brooklyn area, I realized that he was someone I had a real fellowship for. So we went to a Jewish deli that had been sold on to a Muslim owner, if I remember rightly. We went to Dominican restaurants. We went to, I don't think we went to Roberta's, but we went to a Japanese restaurant, which is one of his passions. We ended up just having one of the best days I had on that journey about finding out what it was to be an American. And we bonded. And so the next time we saw each other was on Guy's grocery game. So this was how we met. And I will tell you now, and Justin will hopefully blush with that very pale skin of his, I do think that he is genuinely one of the most interesting people in the culinary world. So when I want to bring Food Network people on, he was the first person I thought of. So Justin, hello.
Simon, thank you for that warm introduction. Yeah, I feel the same. I've upgraded my Jeep since then. You'll be happy to know. Although now that I've opened a restaurant, that it is still littered with stuff. And I own a new crappy vehicle, a 1990 Suzuki Carry right side drive, 4-wheel drive, manual. And that I just leave unlocked because nobody can drive it.
Well, of course, nobody knows stick over here. So the first question, before we kind of go into the culinary side, is I think the question everyone is asking right now is, what is your hair product budget for the year?
I have terrible cowlicks, so I'm working with nature as opposed to working against it. So I just put a dime-sized dab of a product called styling cream made by Bumble and Bumble, and then I just kind of blow it back. It's work with nature. It's what I was given.
And there's no jealousy here at all, of course. But let's start talking about your journey in the culinary world, because I think it's a really interesting one that people are going to want to hear more and ask you more questions about, because yours isn't a traditional one. You didn't go through culinary school, but yet here you are running restaurants. Just tell us a little bit about your time kind of pre-food and how you came into the food industry so people can hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try not to ramble too much. But when I was young, I went to Sam's Club with my dad, and I did the math on like packs of gum. You could buy big packs of gum. And then I realized, well, I could sell these, per stick at school. So I've always had like a little bit of a desire to like make money, to get the things that make me happy. I don't know. Some people have this natural desire. Some people don't. So then when I realized I could get a work permit and start working, I kind of looked around, like babysitting, lifeguard for the summer. And then I was like, wait a minute, bussing tables, like 10% of tips, like back then. And then, yeah, I was like, this is the money. So I was like, I got to impress. So I went to a place called Oliver's Pub, consider yourself at home. And, they said, well, you can bus tables, but you also have to wash dishes. And I realized very quickly that I did not like washing dishes, and that I just really wasn't good for it. I just kind of didn't have the frame at like 14 and a half or 15 years old to deal with the big, heavy stuff. It just lifting glass racks over and over. I wasn't there yet. So I'm not saying that I intentionally failed at being a dishwasher so they would move me to bussing full time, but that might have been my first experience of the Peter principle, where I was promoted to my level of incompetency. And so while I was bussing tables there, I kind of had this weird moment where I bussed a table and someone didn't eat the seafood fries. And I was like, what the heck? Like, those are the most delicious things on the menu. It was like fries and like a Mornay and all of these scallop mixture, whatnot on it. And it was delicious. Old Bay on top because I was in Maryland. And I took a whiff of it and I was like, this ain't right. And I walked it back to the chef and I said, chef, like, don't think this is right. Like, we should figure this out. And he's like, no way, no way, no way. And I was like, fine, then you try it. And he takes a bite and he's like, maybe it's off. And so that was like a big moment because like, you don't, I assume, want your busboy being, your first line of defense against whether or not the food is good or not. But then it kind of clicked in my head like, well, maybe I might know a thing or two about food. So I just kept kind of chasing the front of house career path. And I mean, kept chasing and kept chasing and kept chasing. And I moved from state or city to city and yada, yada, till I was about, I want to say like 23. And then I ended up working for Danny Meyer at a place called The Modern in the MoMA. And so that was 1 Michelin star dining. So obviously I chased that dream for some time and was pretty aggressive about it. And at that point I had learned an awful lot about food, but also really how to be a front of house hustler. And I realized that a big portion of that was trying to articulate stuff to people who don't understand it. And when I was in Colorado in Fort Collins, guys would come off the oil rigs of like Wyoming, North Dakota, and they'd roll up to my restaurant and we've got ankimo, aka monkfish liver on as a special. They got money to burn, but how do you tell some muddy booted, just got off the rig, has only seen men for the past 60 days, that, I really do think you should try the catfish or the cat food of the sea. No, you say, it's like foie gras. Have you had foie gras? Well, foie gras is this, but it's the foie gras of the sea. Now, all of a sudden, well, I can afford foie gras. And now we're selling foie gras, but it's the foie gras of the sea. So rather than describing it as seafood pate, which literally sounds like cat food, now I've sold something. Or when I was at the Modern, we would have lobster in a chamomile nage. They would be like, lobster and tea, what the heck is that? They'd be like, well, if you think about the flavor that goes best with lobster, is probably most well known for going with lobster, it's butter. Butter is a round, soft, pillowy flavor. So is vanilla, round, soft, pillowy. Guess what, my friends? So is chamomile. So is anisette. These are all flavors that pair nicely with that. And so once you could figure out kind of the math of how the flavors worked, and then the words with which to put it out there, then you kind of started accidentally knowing about cooking. Other than that, it was kind of all mechanics. It was like I knew how to put the trim and the paint and all the stuff on. I just kind of needed to figure out how to make the engine and the stuff to make it go. And so then I got called to be on a Food Network show, or more like I drunkenly applied to be on a Food Network show. And they said, well, who's going to cook? It was a 2-person team thing. And I said, I will. How hard could it be? And they were like,
which show? Tell us about that, because I think your introduction to the Food Network, we all come at it from very different ways. And mine was some poor bugger being stuck in an airport and finding my first book and reading it and asking me to be on Iron Chef. And yours was, a very different one as well. And the reason I mention this is I think a lot of chefs watching this and a lot of people seeing this, would love to do some of the shows. And we've been lucky enough to do, a lot of them now. And there is a process to how you get on and how you succeed in there. And I think it might be worth us just touching on those and then going into Food Network Star, which is obviously how you became, most well known initially, and talk about those processes. I hope people will find that interesting.
For sure. So I was, a full-time waiter, a captain at the Modern. And I was seeing a girl who was an actress and would get casting calls for all sorts of things. And I almost hesitantly recommend people sign up for casting calls if you're interested in that, because there are casting calls all the time. Your inbox will be flooded with them. But I just so happened to open one up, and it was for a food show, and it happened to be casting down the street. So I was like half drunk, half hungover. So we've all been there. And I was like, let's just go do it. Who cares? It's walk-ins only. If we have to wait in line, we'll wait in line. But it was kind of towards the end of the day, and nobody else was there. So I walked in and said, hey, we're here for the show. You said you're looking for 2-person teams. So we're ready to do it. And they said, well, the goal of the show is going to be to make a restaurant in 24 hours. And I said, well, that seems feasible. And they were like, okay, but you're both waiters. Who's going to cook? And I was like, I think I can handle it. How hard could it be? And they were like, you're so arrogant. Like, maybe you're made for TV. And I said, I'll give it a shot, whatever you need. And I'll start, studying up in the meantime. And so for the show, they would have multiple interviews to make sure that, you were right for the show. But I think the main thing was they were looking for people who were consistently on and themselves. Guy Fieri, our mentor, always says, for TV, I just need you to act a little bit like you're on something. And sooner or later, that just kind of becomes natural, wherein like, when it's time to entertain, you just want to be the best version of yourself. You don't want to be a different person, just the best version. And so I think that's kind of what they're looking for, is just enthusiastic authenticity. And somehow I managed to jump through all the hoops there. And so they called me and they said, well, what's your restaurant concept? And we came up with this concept. It was called ... ampersand jelly. So each one of the dots was like a little pancake, a little waffle, or a little French toast. And so it was a brunch place where we just made pancakes, waffles, and French toast, but everyone came with a fun compound butter and then a fun jelly that was made out of agar-agar. And, you know me, like that was kind of, I was like, I can't make jelly in like a 24-hour period. I'm just not going to be able to do it that quickly. So what can I do to mimic jelly and have it set in under an hour? Agar-agar, boom. And then, so I ended up winning that show miraculously. And then, as Simon said, Food Network Star called, and I obviously was not going to turn that down. And so
I think before we go on, there's one lesson if everyone has to learn right now is if you want to open a restaurant, as Justin tells you, how hard can it be? I think he's learning now that it's a lot harder than he thought it was going to be initially with his new restaurant. But let's talk about Food Network Star, because that's when we got to, I certainly got to know you. That was probably, I watched Food Network Star and I pick up on it since then. But that was probably the last season I watched from beginning to end, because it was a great roster of people. People like Michelle was on there. There were some wonderful chefs who were on there, all of whom, or quite a few of whom have become pals. And it was, I think, one of the most interesting kind of groups that they've ever had on there. I mean, just tell us about Food Network Star as a kind of impact that it had on you winning that, because I think people sometimes forget the impact it can have on your life when you win one of these big competitions.
Simon, I'll be brutally honest with you. When I signed up for that show, and they said you need to come to a casting in Atlanta, I rolled up to the casting and I met my good friend and our friend Marty Duncan. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Where's your suitcase?" And I said, "I don't need it. I'm just here for a day. I just brought my underwear in my pocket, and I just got a hotel toothbrush and that's it." And she's like, "Well, what? That's just how you're traveling?" I'm like, "Well, I'm only here for a day, so that's it. I'll just, that's it." But in all honesty, I didn't have luggage, period. And so I then, on Food Network Star, we had to travel from New York to Miami. And they had to buy me like new socks and actual luggage because I didn't have any of that stuff. And then like you win Food Network Star, I mean, mid-season of that, I didn't even have to win it. And I had won $10,000 from one challenge. That was like life altering to me, to just know that the work that I do could be appreciated on such a level that the reward could be so big. And then, you start working with companies who think like, maybe what we need is not to listen to our own internal dialogue and our own yes culture, but let's bring someone who might see the world in a different way or see the world in a different view. And let's see what they have to say about our company. Now, all of a sudden you're consulting and then you're developing devices and so on and so forth. So truly winning that was, I would say, one of the most game-changing moments of my life, for sure, hands down.
And what it did is it actually took you, when we first met, you had actually opened your own restaurant, Do or Dine, in New York. And that was, very different, because the way that you created the food there. And I actually never got to eat there, unfortunately, which is a great shame, because when I went back to look at some of the menus, I was just having such a good time with it. But this is what I wanted to get over to people, that your thought process creating that menu was someone who came from a very non-kitchen background and creating those meals. And I'd just love to talk about those. And if people get a chance, they could go and see what you were doing there.
Yeah, being someone who's reasonably self-taught or taught through YouTube, I've just never been in a classroom setting for really anything past high school, and even high school is kind of questionable. I've never had like a little chef on my shoulders that says "This is not the way," or anything like that. I've always that
accent is a hate crime, by the way, and we're going to make a note of that. Kevin, please make a note.
I'm very, very sorry, Simon. I apologize. Don't let it leave this stream. Turn off the recording.
Do you have an HR department? Can I complain to them? Anyway,
yeah, you're looking at them.
We'll let you go this time.
So yeah, it's just anytime there's something that I don't know, I try and focus my curiosity on that. And oftentimes, when you're curious about something, if you keep turning over rocks, you end up like with science, and you end up having to understand how things work on beyond a recipe-based level. And I think the more you know about the why things work, the more you can then creatively apply that why to create something new or something exciting or something that makes you feel as though you have a stronger connection to the food you're making. And I think that ultimately makes better food, and food that can truly become like a signature.
Well, I think perhaps one of the dishes that people might be familiar that I believe you would say you created was the foie gras donut.
Yeah, I mean, the second I came out with the foie gras donut, there were a lot of other people who had said, well, I've paired foie gras with fried bread, or I've done this or that. But I took the classic technique of the trompe l'oeil, the trick of the eye, and I basically I piped the foie gras into a blank donut. Blank is an unfilled donut in my parlance. But then I piped in literally some Smucker's jelly, and then I hit it with a blend of powdered sugar and salt. And so it looked like the most harmless jelly donut you've ever seen. But then when you bit into it, it was this rupturing sensation, this explosion, literally, as foie gras and jam shot like forth from the donut, and the donut was served warm. And so as far as I know, I don't think anyone had ever kind of put it together where it was this kind of weaponized delivery vessel. And I mean, that thing was crazy. We did a food festival once, and I was selling, I think, 11.2 per minute at $12 a pop.
Wow.
And that festival was all day long and into the night. And so, yeah.
I would say, I don't want to interrupt much, but Justin, that is going to be your demo item at the ICCA Summit. I'm sorry. I'm craving it already.
Okay, partner, no problem. I will caution you that the recipe begins on the first day, but that's okay.
So, I mean, let's talk about that, because, I think in some ways you get not labeled with, but people, when they think of you, and I talked to them before this, think of you as being kind of molecular gastronomy. And I think it's probably wider than you do with that. But I do know when we sit and we talk on Tournament of Champions, and what people may not know, and we'll talk about Tournament of Champions later, we're sitting behind looking at the monitors together. We have a competition where we're trying to see who has the most winning chefs. I mean, it's all very kind of
fine, Simon. It's you.
It is me, and I didn't want to bring that up, but thank you for doing that. But you talked to me about molecular ideas that I just know nothing about because I'm too old and too fustian in my ways. But you talked to me about these ideas, and talk to us a bit about that. And I know we're going to take you in from now to do a quick demo of something. What I asked Justin to do for everyone watching is to show us something from his kind of molecular mind, for want of a better word, of something that you might be able to use in some of the processes you have that you might not know about. So just tell us about molecular and how you think it fits in, and then tell us about your demo that you're going to show us.
For sure. And in the interim, just while I get this started, I'm rambling. Look, I've got some water. I'm going to put it into a pot over here on the side. It's like, I don't know, about a quarter of a cup, and I'm going to turn it on just so it can heat. So anyway, I get a little wound up about the term molecular gastronomy, and the reason for that is all it simply means is studying food on a molecular level, which ultimately, the more questions you ask, you're going to end up with, atoms, with complex atoms, which are molecules. And that's kind of the bottom line. But really, anybody who is into chemistry or science and has cooked could potentially be a molecular gastronomist. I think that term has now gotten a little bit buzzy in where it involves using strange powders or Bunsen burners or liquid nitrogen or this, that, and the other. Well, the bottom line is, yes, atoms govern everything that we do. And so, if you keep asking questions about food, unfortunately, you're going to end up with atoms, with molecules, etc. That being said, food science is something that I think we all practice, because science, if you follow the rules, or like the scientific method, you start with something, you say, I bet if I do this, it will be a good result, or at least I hope. You could say a result, any result. And then you look at it and say, well, that was not the result, that is the result, or that's a better result. And so then you say, well, if I'm going to do this again, I might try this differently. That's the scientific method, and that's probably what the first person who said, you know what, that's hot, this is raw. Whoa, it smells good. A dog just walked by and expressed interest in it. Holy mackerel, I just invented steak. And, this is like prehistory, right? So do I love saying that, science, I'll science it all the way to the bank. But in all reality, I only love knowing about techniques that are going to make my life, your life easier, better, or more exciting. And that's where I think that molecular gastronomy, or what we commonly call molecular gastronomy, where it can be fantastic. Because what I'm about to show you, especially as my water heats up here, is how to make a sodium citrate-based nacho cheese. And the reason I love this is because anybody can do it, and nacho cheese always rules. I think this makes some of the best nacho cheese, and we'll talk about that later. But also, I think that the ways in which you can then experiment within this experiment is just...
Well, you told me about this while we were sitting watching Tournament of Champions, and I am the most Luddite of people, so I actually thought about this, and I sent out and bought some sodium citrate. I have it at home. And I decided to make this cheese sauce. Yes, I have exactly that. I got it through Amazon. I use a small amount of it, and I've started making cheese sauce. And now I will tell you, I don't make it any other way. Sometimes I'll use beer, sometimes I'll use wine, sometimes I'll use water, but and I've used, and as you will talk about, you use any cheese, even cheeses that you think are impossible to kind of melt.
It's true.
You'll talk about it, and the quality of it and the consistency of it is amazing.
So yeah, I've got just a little over a quarter cup of water in here. I'm not one on measuring so much. Then I've got just a half teaspoon of the sodium citrate that's going to go into the water. We'll talk about the why and the how of sodium citrate very shortly, but I'd rather get straight to the results. So now that I've got that dissolving in there, and it dissolves very rapidly, I've got straight from the RoboCoo, or the food processor, some sharp cheddar cheese. I grated this right up, and I'm just going to add it a little bit at a time, maybe half a handful or so, and let the heat do its thing. And so normally when you melt cheese, and I like to think of explaining cheese two ways. Imagine you had a giant stocking, or like a net, if you will. And that net was filled with water balloons, but some of the water balloons were filled with water and some of them were filled with fat. So the idea to me, at least the way I think about cheese, is that the protein is all of the water balloons. The fat in the water is the stuff inside the water balloons. And then the net that's holding all of these things is cheese in its current state. So when you go to melt cheese, what happens is those water balloons pop. So think about a pizza. When you make pizza, the cheese melts and you are left with grease, right? And then hopefully you're using like a low moisture mozzarella, and the water just naturally evaporates. So the problem is grease ain't good when it comes to nacho cheese. So what sodium citrate does is, as the cheese melts, it's not even really melting. It's kind of suspending all of those water balloons of fat and water in the water that I added to the pot. And so in no time at all, and I'm going to show you this whisking action, you're starting to see some things that I really like to see. Now, we've not used... I'm sorry?
I said, no, so this to me is, it's magic. This should be, you would never be allowed in church again because of the devil going on in there.
Right? So the aroma here is that of pure, sharp cheddar. I didn't use anything special. I didn't use anything other than what was in the grocery store. But that being said, it's decidedly different from any nacho cheese that you're going to get from a package, or that you're going to get from a can, or that sort of thing. And it's just very simply, it's because we've done less to it. We've not had to make it shelf stable. And now this is ready to serve. It's going to hold this texture for some time. And Simon, as you said, now that we've kind of demonstrated this, the sky is the limit. What liquid can you not put in here? I haven't found one yet. You want to make fondue? Add some white wine, little kirsch, little Gruyere. Now all of a sudden we've got real fondue. You want to turn this into more authentic, like queso fundido? By all means, you could do it. You want beer cheese soup? Thin it out, and now all of a sudden it's the backbone of your soup. Saute some broccoli somewhere else, even if you want to get more crazy, air fry some broccoli somewhere else. Toss it in here, and now you have broccoli cheese soup. Why I love this is, one, it comes together immediately. Two, you don't have to deal with making a roux, as one would classically do for a Mornay, which involves two other ingredients, typically flour and some sort of fat or butter. But also, this is foolproof. Everyone knows what nacho cheese looks like, should feel like, and when it's awesome. A roux, that, like, you're asking anyone, really, like anyone other than someone who works with roux all the time, what should an ideal roux look like? What should an ideal Mornay look like? Then you have problems. You want to throw cooked macaroni in this and then bake it with a breadcrumb crust? Done deal. Anyway, I love this stuff so much. I could talk about it. Can I talk about it just one more moment?
You can talk about it as many moments as you like. That's why you're here.
Okay, great. So sodium citrate is a trisodium of citric acid. What does that mean? It basically means that this is a chemical reaction from citric acid. So when you add Na3, which is trisodium, to citric acid, which is C6H8O7, my friends, I kid you not, you get Na3C6H07. Nacho.
I love that it actually the word spells nacho, which is, of course, completely brilliant.
I didn't make it up. So science found it first. I'm just a huge proponent of it.
You're sharing with us. Now folks can see why I love sitting with Justin on the back of Tournament of Champions or when we do Guy's Groceries together, because we talk about this and then I'll bore him with some food history. And that's basically all the stuff we're talking about while everyone else is cooking and we run off and go and do our own thing. So hopefully people will have found that interesting. Hopefully you'll have lots of questions. I know, Kevin, you wanted to ask us some questions as well between the two of us about some of our time on TV. So we can hand over to you and answer some of those as well. But I hope everyone sees why I think Justin is truly one of the most remarkable people on food TV. There's no one really doing what he does, and certainly not with such blind enthusiasm.
I love it. That was great and perfect comments too. But it is amazing when you look at, oh God, look at that now. It's just, it's incredible. Crazy. I can't wait to try it. So we'll actually put on the website, this video will go up on Friday. So tomorrow or day after tomorrow. And actually what we'll do is we'll put some access to websites where you can go and purchase the product so you can play around with it at home. Yeah.
I just put mine on Amazon. It was super easy.
Yeah. Well, hey, before we get rolling into the questions I have to ask you, Mike, why don't you show a little video here about Tournament of Champions? And if for those of you that missed the intro in the beginning, if you haven't seen it, you have to go and watch. I think it's the best show Food Network's ever done.
This is the Tournament of Champions. Let's go! Let's go! Oh, come on. Oh, we knew it. You could potentially be the next chapter in Darnell's Cinderella story.
No, I will be the Cinderella.
How are you going to use the tortilla press?
I'm gonna try to do a quick fry bread. My wife is Native American, and just as Thanksgiving, I was in Oklahoma learning how to make some native fry breads. And I don't really have no crunchy element to this dish, so this is gonna bring it and gonna blow them away.
10, 9, 8, 7. Darnell, your plates have to be in the front.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Fry bread.
You didn't get it on.
I forgot my fry bread.
If the randomizer is going to tell me to use shrimp, I'm going to use shrimp as many ways as I can.
This year, shrimp shells and butter, that's going to turn into a hollandaise. My friends, I repeat, shrimpy butter hollandaise.
The winner of the West Coast wild card is...
Wow.
Chef Aisha.
Really great crisp texture on the outside. Then she's going to dress them with chili and shallots, little red wine vinegar, so a kind of warm sprout salad.
I lay the dough down on the spetzel maker.
Noodles? Are we seeing spetzel?
Extruded noodles, rice noodles.
I thought he was coating the crab, and he let us just sit here and babble.
Chef Jet did not come to play.
Sauces and stocks take a long time to really develop flavor. To really kind of shortcut that, I take all of the shells, throw them in the blender.
Oh, she's getting downright dirty, folks. This is a one-way ticket to Flavor Town. She's gonna grind it, she's gonna strain it. Watch out. Clear! For the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in TOC history, we have a dead even tie.
Are you kidding me?
To come back and battle for the semifinal.
Are you kidding me?
That was an incredible episode, by the way. That was a real shocker. And then to see where it went from there. I think for me, the first question is, some of these chefs we've obviously had at our events over the years, right? But nowhere in that, one like capacity in one show have I ever seen so many star chefs and some of the brightest talent in the world, forget about this country, to be together in a building together, and you two are the co-hosts of it. I mean, it had to be quite amazing. And some of the things that you learned about, maybe not food, because you guys are both very brilliant from that standpoint, but what you learned about the other people and the competitors was probably pretty amazing too. Give us some of your top things that happened during the experience.
Justin, why don't you start? You're the guest.
Well, thank you. I think the number one thing here is that you're seeing kind of truly the distillate of these chefs, right? They cannot plan ahead at all. And they try. They're like, what's on the randomizer? I'm like, no one knows. No one's going to know. There's no way you can plan for it. So you're literally, you know, the randomizer is almost like a slot machine. And then it kind of turns the chefs into a little bit of a slot machine as well. When you put these ingredients into one of these chefs, pull the lever, this thing comes out. And it was just really incredible to me to see when chefs are playing the exact same game, just where it kind of ends up when it's run through that information filter known as the chef. Because same ingredients, same requirements, two different chefs, two distinctly different dishes. I think that to me was the most exciting.
For me, I think first of all, and I come at it from a point of view, you know, I've been doing this for 13 years, and I've been lucky enough to go through Next Iron Chef, where you had incredible chefs like, you know, Zakarian and all those people winning it, going through all of the shows that I've done. And I have never been in a competition or never been involved with a competition that was as fierce as this, where it was all chefs who were completely at their best. They were all on their game, and they went into this. And they're also competitive when they went up. And I talk about people like Antonia. You know, I always joke that Antonia would try and beat you crossing the road. And when you see her cook, and when you see her win, and when you see her lose, you see who they are. For me, it was exactly what I think Justin said. When something goes into their brain from that randomizer, you can actually see their brains working. They don't plan. You can't plan for Tournament of Champions. You just have to be able to cook. And then when it goes into their brains, that's where all their years of experience come in. And those are the people who won. The ones who you could see immediately were like deers in the headlights, were the ones who went out quickly. It's those who were able to transmute what they saw on the randomizer almost as it was spinning into a dish. And by the end of it, they were the ones who won. And you could see it with the winners.
I have two.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add two little things. So I actually called a mathematician, John Urschel, to discuss the amount of possibilities it takes for you to win, how many possibilities you've gone through. And it's in the trillions of possibilities. So there's absolutely, like, the possibility of planning that you will win every single round is in the trillions. So I point that out. But I think then, like, the other thing that really was, I don't know, pretty funny to me is the culinary team who sets up the randomizer actually asked Simon and I for input. And diabolically, like, I know some of the things that I suggested made it through and then were terrible. Like the takoyaki pan started to really sink some ships. And then, Simon, you had something too that really put the hurt on him.
I can't remember which one it was that I suggested, but some of the ingredients as well that they got. What's interesting is that some of the things that I thought would be pretty straightforward, like using an air fryer, the chefs were just like, I've never used an air fryer before. And I was like, really? So I think there were a lot of elements where they're not using what a home cook would use. And they were really struggling to figure out, you know, what this actually a pretty basic heat source that they've gussied up to sell to kind of consumers was. So I think there were elements where they got flustered. The other thing I think they found, for me, most interestingly, as somebody who spends his life traveling around the world, was when they were given certain styles. They were given Caribbean, or they were given North African, or they were given, and they kind of sometimes got flustered as to what they were. So North Africa might mean I'm going to put loads of harissa on something, which is kind of, it became very ersatz sometimes when they were struggling. You could see, and there were some people who really got it and some people just didn't get it at all.
It's funny that, and I swear I'm not making this up. I mean, my next question was going to be, who was the most pissed off person because they got what they got from the randomizer? And you did a great segue leading into that. I don't know if you can talk about the chefs in particular. You don't have to say their name maybe, but, you know, were some like extremely upset because they got the mix that they did, because some obviously were easier than others. And of course it is random, so they didn't have any control over it.
I think, I mean, my view isn't that the chefs are kind of angry at the competition. They're angry at themselves because they're all great chefs. And I think if they, for whatever reason, didn't represent themselves at the best of their cooking ability, they were kind of, yeah, we all look inwards, and they were just pissed off with themselves. And I won't name any of the names because I think that's unfair. But there were some, and you could see it. And that kind of inward anger, I think, is what you see a lot of chefs in competitions have. But particularly people who are like this, because if I genuinely believe, and I said this to Guy, even through the play-ins, as it were, with people like Chris Constantino in the play-ins. I mean, give me a break. If they, and I said this, and Justin's heard me say this many times, I would put Chris Constantino in the top 5 chefs in the country. I genuinely believe he's that good. And yet he didn't get into the final. Now, he was angry at himself. He wasn't angry at the competition. He just didn't give the best of himself to get in there. And so that's what I saw, is that you really see them looking inwards. And what I noticed from tournament 1, they all wanted to win, but it was a new competition. Tournament 2, they were desperate to be involved and to win. There was a level of intensity in season 2 that you can't get in a first season of anything, because it hasn't got that reputation. Tournament 3 is going to be even bigger. I know they're having chefs come to them all the time. And I know I've had about 20 emails from different chefs around the country going, how can I get into that? And I'm going, well, I'm not sure I can help you, but you should. There's some great chefs who haven't been included yet.
Oh, that's cool. Justin, any follow-up on that one, or what?
Oh, no, just like Simon's totally right about the inward anger thing. I think why Tournament of Champions is such a remarkable competition is because you can't really be a chef who says I'm only good at one thing, or you can't say this is my specialty. Tournament of Champions, cooking is your specialty. And if you have a hole, any sort of hole in your knowledge, no matter how small, the randomizer could potentially find it. And 99% of the time, it's going to. It's just kind of Murphy's Law. But also, when you have a trillion ways that this thing could play out, and you only know a billion things about food, chances are, it's going to hit on something where you don't feel super comfortable. And, you then hit yourself and say, like, why don't I know about this? Why did I dismiss the air fryer as just some, midnight advertisement thing, or infomercial product? When in fact, people are writing whole cookbooks about it. And we all know that a turbocharged convection oven is a thing that people love to use. Why wouldn't a home cook love to use it on their countertop? That's all an air fryer is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that's for those of you that are listening in or you're watching that didn't watch the show. The reason that these two are co-hosts is because it's blind judging. Okay. So the judges don't know who these, amazingly well-known competitors are. So in that scenario, when you had to describe somebody else's dish, was there ever some difficulty or some times where maybe they explained it in a different way you would explain it, but you have to explain it the way they, explain it? Was there any of those things that happened?
Yes, hugely. So I explained kind of earlier in this that I would say a good 80% of my career has been in front of house, and articulating food is something that I love to do. And I love to explain things and kind of really hit on what is the definition of something. So, for example, someone said, this is a barbecue sauce. And I said, brah, like that is hardly thick. That is definitely not nappe. There is no way no world in which this would be considered a sauce. What if we called it a jus? And they're like, barbecue jus. I like that. And so therefore the guy basically served a somewhat watery barbecue sauce, but because it was jus, they were like, like French dip, jus, barbecue jus. So now we turn what was a liability into an asset. Oh, such creative idea, barbecue jus. It's not thick or heavy, And so anyway, I at least had to fight with the chefs a little bit to, just like relinquish the reins from here and let me be your lawyer. Let me be your front of house staff. Let me plead your case. And just trust me, I've been watching everything you're doing, and I'm here to make you look as good as possible. But if you tell me directly to say something, there goes pleading the fifth,
For me, I think the hardest thing to begin with, certainly in season 1, was the chefs, even though they knew it was a blind tasting, we were just in the way. We're asking questions of them all the way through. You see us with our notebooks. We fill up in very different ways. We do our notes, but we're asking questions all the time. And sometimes it's like, I'm too busy, I'm cooking. And then what we have to say to them is, if you don't tell us, we can't tell the judges. So it's up to you. We don't do that in a kind of controversial way, but we're just going, you need to tell us. What I noticed in season 2, they got it. They got why we were there. I'm not going to name any of the winners and losers because if people haven't watched it yet, let them enjoy this because it is remarkable to watch. But what we got is they were saying, hey, Simon, I'm doing this. Hey, Simon, this is what I'm doing. I want to think about calling it this. Or I would say, so what you're making is a coconut blah-de-blah with blah-de-blah. And they go, oh, that's perfect. Use that. And so what you found, it became very collaborative. And we have to do this through the cooking. And then we literally get 30 seconds at the end, if we're lucky, to talk to them. And then we get 2 minutes to scribble down all our notes when we do our presentation. So there's a lot goes into it. But I noticed in season 2, it was much more not us and them, it was us together. And that made it much easier and really fun as well. Stressful, but fun.
Well said.
That's really cool. All right, so this will be the last question on this front. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the trends along the way, both what you've learned in all your experiences in your shows, but more importantly, what you see in your life and your experiences of travel and whatever, and where you see us post-pandemic. Where's the future of restaurant new menu items going to be? So the last question I'll ask is a real simple, easy one, and maybe I shouldn't ask this, but so since you had to be the ones describing the dishes to the judges who are blind judging, any competition between the two of you on who wins?
Oh, constant. And I'm not a competitive person, but Justin just has a face that urges competition.
Some people call that punchable, but okay.
Well, yeah. I would never say it, and I certainly wouldn't want to ruin that hair. No, we actually in a very kind of gentle way, we just keep a note of who's doing well with their chefs. And often, the one thing I will say is there are times where I think, yeah, I've got this one, and I'm going to beat his chef, or my chef's going to beat his chef. And it turns around the other way, because the judges in the end, they're individuals with their own viewpoints too. And this is the thing, we get points of view from people watching and they go, oh, it's this, and it's all fixed and they all know this. I can tell you, because it's the way Guy works, this is completely clean. It is, they do not see the judges. The judges have no idea who's cooking, male, female. If it's kind of beaten into us. We don't go, he cooked or she cooked. It's the chef cooked. And so this is, of all competitions, and Food Network is strong about this anyway, but this is the cleanest, straightforward. That's how we wanted it. And the impetus or the onus on us is to really make sure that happens.
Well, it comes through that way, and it really it's exciting. Like I said, it's the best show that I've seen. I think it's the best one the network has ever done over all the years. So let's shift gears here a little bit. Let's talk about trends. I mean, what do you see? Here we are in this pandemic. It looks like what's happened just in the last week is the lights switched on and the world's opened up, or our world in this country has opened up, I should say. So what do you see? What's going to be popping up on menus? What are there ingredients? Are there certain dishes? Is there a certain ethnic style that we're going to see more of, in your personal opinions?
Justin, what do you?
Yeah, so I think thing one for me is I think fermentation is hugely out of the closet. I think now we've all experienced kimchi, we've all experienced sourdough. And we've kind of understood as a populace that probiotics are good for us. And I think that it's not the kind of thing that people need to hide and say, yeah, this is fermented, this is fermented, that. I think the general populace understands that probiotics, gut health, sourdough, kimchi, all of that stuff is interrelated. They might not understand, the science of it, but I think we all get that fermented is not a bad word anymore.
I think it's a great suggestion. For me, I've got two things just to mention. One is just, and I keep banging the drum for this, and partly because I'm married to someone who's Filipino-American. I think Filipino food is the most underrated food, certainly in Asia, but definitely across. And I think we're getting some real champions of that cuisine coming through right now. And I want to see that grow and grow and grow, because there's so many great people. The other thing I want to mention, and obviously we're facing this right now with restaurants reopening. And the thing is, I talk with a lot of chefs all the time, and people are struggling to find people because it's hard to hire anyone. And there's two arguments to this. I always say, I was chatting with Justin, I go, one's the Republican argument, who think they're all at home sitting in hammocks and drinking, margaritas because they've got the welfare check. And the other one I always say is the Democrat argument, which is they've all gone to get jobs in other industries where they're getting better paid and they're getting benefits, and they realize they can get an easier life doing different work. And I think the truth is both of those are happening right now. The reality is it's a mixture. But I do think there's also an onus upon their restaurant owners to be looking at the way they treat their staff and how they can make their staff get benefits to make them want to come back into the industry as well. And I think that's something that people like us are going to have lots of conversations about.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're at that time at the end of the hour, which flies by. And thank you so much, both of you. This was so insightful. One of the things we discussed was when Simon, who's in our office today, he just happened to be in Orlando doing an event here. By the way, while we're waiting on that, can show us your hands. Why are they yellow, Simon?
Oh, I was doing an event at the Lowe's Pacific yesterday, cooking chicken tikka masala, and I was eating it. Thank you. Oh, someone is handing me a drink. Lovely. Well, yes, you might not know that I'm actually one door away from Kevin, so we don't get any reverb. And so I was cooking, so my hands are completely yellow with turmeric.
So what we decided to do was, Simon was so nice to do one of these earlier webinars with us where we had some tastings. And so we brought a little bit back. He's got it's the Paul John, right? This
is from India. This is an Indian single malt, really beautiful, called Paul John Fusion.
And I've got one you turned me on to, the Peat Monster. Maybe many people out there had this when we had the tasting on that. And Justin, what do you have in your hand?
I've got an American-made sake in a can. I'm actually shooting this right now from my restaurant in an abandoned corner. And I forgot to get a beverage to toast with. But hey, this guy's a gold medal at the Los Angeles International Wine Competition in 2019. So there you have it.
Tell us about the name of your restaurant, Justin.
Oh, so I'm at Bokujo Ramen. And here, let's cheers first.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bang. So yeah, my wife and I made a restaurant called Bokujo Ramen. There's the logo right there on my 6 shots of espresso, as one does when they're opening a restaurant. And yeah, it's a ramen shop. I live in South Dakota, so we took a look at what we need, what we like, and that was Japanese food. And then we took a look at what we had, and like the ocean was not one of those things in South Dakota. So I'd been working with ranchers for the South Dakota Beef Industry Council. And I realized like we have all this stuff to make great ramen literally growing in our backyard. All we need are noodles, and we found a great well-known supplier for those. And bing bong, now we have a ramen shop that supports the local ag industry. And ultimately, I think is pretty darn delicious. We actually will open up June 9 for our first indoor seating. We actually built the restaurant as a to-go only concept, not knowing exactly how long this situation would last.
I was going to say, and just to give a little tease, we'll talk more about this at the summit, but talk a little bit about how the pandemic actually became a plus for you in opening a restaurant.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm kind of an optimist naturally, but we came across a space that no one was biting on, and it had sat for some time, and I kind of looked at it, and then no, it's not for me. It was an old bakery space. How can I make ramen in a bakery space? And then I had plenty of time to think about things. Obviously, no one was doing anything. And I said, I think we can do this. And then I kind of cracked the code on that. And then my wife and I said, like, we don't know really what direction this is going to go. And so we ended up building this ramen restaurant that we can run as literally myself and my wife. I'm making the stuff, she's packaging it and sending it out. And it's been a huge hit here. And people have really enjoyed it. And I think that we were able to really take the time to, start something small and start something thoughtfully, and to really just kind of put a lot of focus and not have a deadline and not necessarily have to rush into things. And people have been so overwhelmingly supportive, and people were so happy to see something new kind of come out of this tragic time. And it really, I'm just very thankful for everyone involved who has been so supportive of it. And, to me, there was never a better time to just put my head down and think about stuff.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that, and good luck in your opening coming up. And with that, let's go to Mike and show our final video. But I want to say thanks to everyone. Of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another person who is on a Food Network show right now. But we'll tease that a little bit because I've got to get some more details and make sure it's confirmed for what we're doing on June 2nd. But anyway, Mike, let's show our video. And thanks to all of our sponsors, members who are on. And thanks, Justin and Simon, for doing this. And look forward to working with you guys when we get to Providence.
Can't wait.
Looking forward to it.